My name is Mary Catherine Overstreet, and this is Rooted in the Body, Reframed in the Mind. It explores the relationship between the body and the mind in therapy. I was drawn to this topic because in my clinical work, especially with trauma and emotional dysregulation, I kept noticing how often clients struggle physiologically before they can meaningfully engage in cognitive interventions. That led me to wonder how body-based and somatic tools fit with the CBT framework we've been studying. For this project, I reviewed the CBT DBT ACT workbook by Emily Jefferson and explored the sections on somatic awareness, nervous system regulation, trauma responses, and mindfulness. I wanted to understand how the body can be used as an ally in strengthening therapeutic outcomes. Does integrating somatic practices into CBT provide better support for clients who struggle with trauma and emotional regulation? This is what drove my entire project. I chose it because clients with trauma often experience intense body-based reactions like hyperarousal, shutdown, or emotional flooding. These physiological states make it very difficult for them to use typical CBT strategies, such as reframing thoughts or using problem solving. What I wanted to learn was whether adding somatic tools like grounding, breathwork, vagus nerve activation, or mindful movement would help clients access a calmer nervous system so they could actually use CBT skills more effectively. The workbook emphasized that emotional distress is not just cognitive, it also lives in the body, which is especially true for trauma. So this question allowed me to explore how these two approaches can work together instead of separately. Now, when I talk about somatic practices, I mean body-based approaches that help clients connect physical sensations to emotional experiences. Somatic practices can include body awareness. That's noticing physical sensations, posture, breath, and tension. Vagus nerve activation, which is using breath work, humming, cold exposure, or grounding to shift the nervous system into a calmer state. Mindful movement, gentle stretching, yoga, grounding postures, meditation, guided muscle relaxation. Somatic just means of the body, and these practices help clients regulate their internal state before trying to engage cognitively. This aligns with what we often see in practice. Clients cannot think clearly, challenge thoughts, or reflect on beliefs if they're overwhelmed or dysregulated. These tools create a foundation of safety and presence, which makes the later stages of CBT much more effective. Now that we understand what somatic practices are, I wanted to talk to you about the reason the body matters so much in the context of CBT, and it is the mind-body connection. The workbook emphasizes that emotional experiences are not just cognitive, they're also physiological. When someone has experienced trauma or chronic stress, their nervous system often stays in states of hyperarousal or shutdown. In these states, access to cognitive functions is limited. It is very difficult to challenge thoughts or use CBT strategies when the body feels unsafe or overwhelmed. This idea is supported by Beck's model as well. He explains that emotional distress involves thoughts, behaviors, and physiological arousal working together. When the body's highly activated, it becomes harder for clients to evaluate thoughts objectively or engage in problem solving. Somatic practices help shift the body back into what we call the window of tolerance, where clients feel grounded enough to think clearly. Once the nervous system is calmer, CBT interventions like thought monitoring or reframing become much more effective. So the mind and body are not two separate systems competing for attention, they're working together. And when we help the body regulate first, the mind becomes more accessible for therapeutic work. There are many types of somatic tools, but for this project, I focused on 3 that appeared most consistently across the workbook and trauma literature. The first is the vagus nerve activation. Techniques like slow diaphragm breathing, humming, extended exhales, or even holding something cool can activate that parasympathetic nervous system, and this helps the body shift out of a threat response. Then we also have body scanning, which helps clients notice sensations without judging them. This builds awareness of where they carry tension, what emotions feel like physically, and what sensations change as they regulate. This is especially useful when clients struggle to name emotions. Then we also have mindful movement. This includes grounding postures, gentle stretching, guided muscle relaxation, or mindful walking. Movement often helps release stored tension and gives the body a way to complete stress cycles. So deep breathing, grounding, and body scanning are key somatic interventions. The techniques are simple, accessible, and kid-friendly, which is great for the work I do with children. What makes them powerful is that they can be used before, during, or after CBT exercises to enhance that regulation and increase effectiveness. Now that we've covered the tools, let's talk about how these somatic practices support trauma processing specifically. Trauma often shows up in therapy not as a story, but as sensations, triggers, or sudden emotional overwhelm. Clients may understand logically that they are safe, but their body responds as if the trauma is still happening. Somatic practices give clients a way to calm this physiological alarm system and create a stable internal environment for trauma processing. For example, grounding or breathwork can help reduce emotional flooding during a trauma narrative work. Mindful movement can help clients stay connected to the present moment instead of disassociating. Body awareness helps clients notice early signs of dysregulation so we can intervene before they become overwhelmed. This also reflects what Ehlers and Clark describe in their trauma model. Trauma memories often lack context and feel present rather than past. Somatic regulations help clients reorient to time and place by strengthening their sense of safety in the here and now. Once grounded in their body, clients can use CBT techniques to examine beliefs about safety, responsibility, or worth without becoming emotionally hijacked. In other words, somatic tools help bridge the gap between the emotional brain and the thinking brain. One of the concepts that stood out to me is the idea that emotional memory is often stored in the body, not just in thoughts. So, of course, why wouldn't we work with thoughts and the body when trying to process them? The workbook discusses how chronic tension, fatigue, or tightness can be connected to unresolved emotions and past experiences. This aligns with van der Kolk's research, suggesting that trauma becomes embedded in sensory and physiological patterns. This means clients may experience muscle tightness, stomach pain, or a racing heart without consciously recalling a trauma. Their body remembers what their mind avoids. Somatic practices address this by teaching clients to notice and interpret bodily signals rather than suppress them. When clients understand that sensations have meaning, they gain insight into their emotional world long before the thoughts are accessible. This is also important in CBT because body cues can serve as early indicators for that emotional dysregulation. So if a client can recognize tightness in their chest or shallow breathing, they can intervene with CBT strategies before the emotion peaks. Helping clients reconnect with their bodies allows them to approach trauma memories with more stability, which makes cognitive processing safer and more effective. So, somatic practices help clients regulate their nervous system. When someone's in a state of hyperarousal or shutdown, they cannot meaningfully access these CBT tools. Somatic practices like breathwork and grounding create the physiological safety needed for cognitive work to even be possible. Second, the body stores emotional memory. Tight muscles, stomach aches, or a racing heart can actually be leftover pieces of past experiences that were just never fully processed. When clients learn to understand and listen to these signals, they gain another pathway into their emotional world. Third, using somatic tools alongside CBT improves trauma processing. Instead of forcing clients into cognitive restructuring while their body is still in survival mode, somatic practices help them stay anchored and present. This reduces emotional flooding and avoidance, two of the biggest barriers in trauma treatment. And finally, integrating these approaches creates a much more holistic and compassionate framework for clients. That's children and adults. It honors the fact that trauma is not just a story in the mind, but a lived experience in the body, and healing requires addressing both. These takeaways, guided with my understanding, shaped the way I see my own future work with clients. As I worked through this project, I realized how much potential somatic tools have for strengthening CBT in the work I do with children and alternative therapies. One of the biggest takeaways is that regulation needs to happen in the body before insight can happen in the mind. I plan to begin more sessions with grounding, breathwork, or movement-based warm-ups. This will help clients enter therapy from a place of safety and presence. With children, I can integrate somatic practices through playful movement, sensory activities, and creative arts interventions, which are tools that fit naturally with the alternative therapy approaches that I love, including dance movement and art-based regulation tools. This project confirmed that Somatic-Informed CBT aligns perfectly with how I already work, combining creativity, movement, and emotional awareness. Doing this, I want to continue learning about trauma-informed somatic practices and exploring ways to blend them with cognitive restructuring in developmentally appropriate ways. Thank you for listening, and I hope this encourages you to consider the body as a partner in the cognitive work that we do, because what is rooted in the body is then reframed in the mind. Thank you.